media at Redistricting Michigan to find the link for viewing on YouTube. Our live stream today includes closed captioning, ASL interpretation, and Spanish, Bengali, and Arabic translation services will be provided for effective participation in this meeting. Email us at redistricting@michigan.gov for additional viewing options or details on accessing language translation services for this meeting. People with disabilities needing other specific accommodations should also contact redistricting@michigan.gov. This meeting is being recorded and will be available at www.michigan.gov/MICRC for viewing at a later date. This meeting is also being transcribed, and those transcriptions will be made available and posted on michigan.gov/MICRC, along with written public comment submissions. This is also a public comment portal that may be accessed by visiting michigan.gov/MICRC. This portal can be utilized to post maps and comments, which can be viewed by both the commission and the public. Members of the media who have questions before, during, or after the meeting should direct those to Edward Woods III, our communications, and outreach director for the commission. He can be reached at woodse3@michigan.gov. For the purposes of the public watching and the public record, I will now turn to the Michigan Department of State, who will take note of the commissioners present.
Hello, commissioners. Please say present when I call your name. If you are attending the meeting remotely, please state that you are attending the meeting remotely, and unless your absence is due to military duty, announce your physical location by stating the county, city, township, or village, and the state from which you are attending the meeting remotely. I will start with Doug Clark.
Present.
Juanita Curry. Anthony Eade.
Present.
Brittany Kellum.
Present.
Rhonda Lang. Steve Lett.
Present.
Cynthia Orton. MC Rothhorn.
Present.
Rebecca Satella.
Present and attending remotely from Wayne County, Michigan.
Janice Follett.
Present.
Aaron Wagner.
Present, attending remotely from Charlotte, Michigan.
Richard Weiss.
Present.
Dustin Witches.
Present.
10 commissioners are present and there is a quorum.
Thank you, Michigan Department of State, Sarah Reinhardt. As a reminder to the public watching, you can view the agenda at www.michigan.gov/MICRC. The third item on our agenda is the adoption of the agenda. I would now entertain a motion to approve the meeting agenda.
So moved.
Motion made by Commissioner MC Rothhorn. Can I have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Lett. Is there any discussion or debate on the motion?
I'd actually like to amend the agenda.
Okay.
Never mind.
Are you sure, Commissioner Eve? Okay. Hearing no
Pardon me, Madam Chair. Commissioner Eade, would you mind speaking more directly into the microphone?
Yes, no, I retract my motion.
Okay. Hearing no discussion, it is moved in second that the agenda be approved. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed, raise your hand and say nay. The ayes have it, the motion carries, and the agenda has been adopted. Moving on to the review and approval of minutes. We'll now review and approve the minutes from the June 15th, 2021 regular commission meeting held in Detroit at the Village Dome at Fellowship Chapel. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the June 15th, 2021 meeting, which are also posted on michigan.gov/MICRC.
Madam, I'd like to make a motion to amend the minutes.
Okay, motion made by Commissioner Rothorn. Can I have a second?
Second.
Second made by Commissioner Lett, excuse me. All those. And Commissioner Rothorn, what is your motion to amend the minutes to?
I move the meeting minutes of the June 15th regular meeting be amended to change the time of adjournment to the front and last page of the minutes from 2:47 PM to 2:50 PM. Small change.
Thank you, Commissioner Rothorn. And to clarify, that second for the amended motion was made by Commissioner Lett. Is there any discussion or debate on the motion? Hearing none, we'll now vote on the motion to amend the minutes of the June 15th, 2021 meeting minutes to change the time of adjournment on the first and last page of the minutes from 2:47 PM to 2:50 PM. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, raise your hand and say nay. And the ayes prevail. The motion is adopted.
Madam Chair, I have one more motion.
Yes,
To amend.
Commissioner Rothorn.
I move the meeting minutes of the June 15th public hearings be amended to change the time of adjournment on the first page of the minutes from 7:27 PM to 7:24 PM.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Rothorn, second made by Commissioner Janice Follett.
Madam Chair,
Yes, General Counsel. Did you want to just do it that way? Okay. Okay. All those in favor of the motion that's on the floor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, raise your hand and say nay. The ayes have it. The amended motion carries. Now, okay. And now we're going to go back to the main motion on the floor, which is to approve the minutes for the June 15th, 2021 regular commission meeting held in Detroit at Village Dome at Fellowship Chapel. May I have a motion?
To approve them as amended?
Yes.
I do that.
second.
Motion made by Commissioner Rothorn, second made by Commissioner Villette. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All those
Aye.
opposed? I'm sorry. All those opposed, raise your hand and say nay. And the motion carries, and we have approved the regular meeting minutes for the June 15th, 2021 regular commission meeting. If there are no further amendments, I will have a motion to approve a motion to approve the amended motion of the June 15th, 2021 hearing held at the Village Dome at Fellowship Chapel.
So moved.
Motion made by Commissioner Rothorn. Can I have a second? Second made by Commissioner Eid. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor of approving the public hearing minutes from the Detroit Village Dome at Fellowship Chapel on June 15th, 2021, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed, raise your hand and say nay. The motion carries. The ayes have it. And the public hearing minutes from June 15th, 2021 for our public hearing in Detroit at the Village Dome and Fellowship Chapel, a mouthful, has been approved. We'll now move on in the agenda to the public comment pertaining to agenda topics. For clarification, Michigan Department of State, we have 3 virtual public comment for today's meeting, correct?
That is correct, Madam Chair.
Okay, and so some guidelines for our remote public comment. Individuals who have signed up and indicated they would like to provide live remote public commentary to the commission will now be allowed to do so. I will call your name and our staff will unmute you. If you are on a computer, you will be prompted by the Zoom app to unmute your microphone and speak. If you are on the phone, a voice will say the host would like you to speak and prompt you to press *6 to unmute. I will call on you by your name, and note that if you experience technical or audio issues and we do not hear from you for 3 to 5 seconds, we will move on to the next person in line and then return to you after you are done speaking. If your audio still does not work, you can email us at redistricting@michigan.gov, and we will help you troubleshoot so you can participate during the next public comment period at a later hearing or meeting. If you have signed up today to speak twice, you will speak after everyone who is spoken the first time speak. You will have 2 minutes to address the commission. Please conclude your remarks when you hear the timer. First in line to provide public comment is Mr. James Gallant. Again, if I mispronounce any part of your name, please do correct me. Allow a few moments for our staff to unmute you.
Mr. Gallant, you're unmuted. You may proceed.
Hello? You there yet?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Hello?
We can hear
Hello?
you.
Oh, okay. Hello, my name is James Gallant. I'm with the Marquette County Suicide Prevention Coalition, and my community of interest is the entire United States of America and the Constitution thereof. And I would like to say that I do appreciate that you folks really are trying to concentrate on your parliamentary procedure and starting to, try to get it back in order. But, as a wise individual once said, not try, do. It's just a matter of you just got to do it. And I appreciate that you started approving the agenda. Okay, you just started that now at the last meeting, I believe. And so all the other agendas were not approved. And in the fundamental principle of parliamentary law, then the agenda is not a legitimate agenda until it's approved by a majority vote at the meeting. And you just started doing that. So we're gonna have to really go back and try to tighten up on that. And to clarify to you folks that there's why I keep saying these things over, because there's a section in Robert's Rules of Order, which you have approved by vote, in disciplinary action. And disciplinary action takes place after a member or the chair has been pointed out the breach to the chair or the member 3 times. And then you can just move on with disciplinary action. And so if this ever ends up in court, they're going to ask me, they're going to say, well, what did you do to try to resolve this issue? I said, well, I went to them and I can show them, and I will then have a little video of how I came to you and I asked you to, address these bylaws, public hearing, public meeting concerning bylaws alone. Where did these bylaws come from? How did you ever get these? Where were the secret meetings handled? I want the minutes of the secret meetings where those proposed bylaws came from, where there was meetings, there was somebody happened, and your lawyer's not saying that she did that on her own. Well, and I don't believe she did. And I believe that there was others, at least. It got to at least be Mr. Brady, the chief civil counsel for the department. I'm assuming that she consulted with somebody. And it's just not clear in the minutes. So that means that that's a problem. And it's a breach of the rules, general, the way we do it in America. And I would ask you folks to get back to the way that we do it in America instead of trying to move on and change the rules and reset the system and reboot the system like some folks try to thinking that they're trying to do. And I found other commissions. I'm actually exploring other commissions and councils that the governor has been creating lately, and they're doing the exact same thing. So it's kind of like there's a mission here to undermine the Robert's Rules of Order and the way we do it in America. And then you're just going to say, hey, guess what? We're just doing it a different way. Well, that'll all pan out.
Mr. Gallant, your allotted 2 minutes has ended.
Well, yeah.
Thank you
Well,
so
thank you very
much.
much, Madam Chair Brittany.
Our second remote public comment for today's meeting is Felicia Banks. Felicia, please allow a couple of moments for staff to unmute you. And Michigan Department of State staff, I yield to you.
Good afternoon to you, Felicia Banks. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much for taking this time to the MICRC and allowing it to me. I have the highest regard for your sense of integrity and your discipline when it comes to serving in this capacity. I'm grateful. I'm a proud Detroiter for fourth generation. And my concern today toward today's meeting is that the Detroit downtown area is, of course, a source of pride in its progress for its all. However, its lines make it more of a city within a city, and thereby isolating a portion of its city, the city citizens for equitable fund distribution. So my concern is, and my question are the same, is what is the commission's current thoughts toward addressing the redrawing of its lines?
Thank you for taking the time to address the commission. I would encourage you to utilize our public comment portal and to pose that question along with maybe an area of downtown so that we can take it under consideration, as well as we have our public hearing this evening that starts at 5 o'clock if you can make it. So I encourage you to share, because that's definitely something along the lines of a community of interest regarding Detroit. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. I will certainly do that, and I will be there this evening.
Thank you. And at this time, we do not have any more remote public commentary for today's meeting. So we'll move along in the agenda to our unfinished.
Madam Chair, we do have a public comment
You're
participant
right.
who has requested to speak a second time.
You're right. You're right. We have a public comment virtually, and I'll turn to Michigan Department of State staff. I think our third public comment is Mr. James Gallant.
Hello.
Hi, Mr. Gallant. We can hear you.
Hello. All righty. My name is James Gallant with the Marquette County Suicide Prevention Coalition, and my community of interest is the entire United States of America and its Constitution. And so I guess to consider just to move on with our conversation here, about disciplinary action and rules of procedure. I find it interesting that the chair of this commission has now moved on to talking about Ms. Reinhardt as Secretary of Department of State staff now, instead of addressing her by what is alleged to be her title, which is Madam Secretary. Okay, you said she was appointed by the Secretary of State to be the secretary of this commission. Now, do you have a secretary or not? Because you're like, oh, staff is going to just, make sure everybody's here? And who's making the decisions and who is actually doing the elections? You see, the Secretary of State is obviously the highest ranking elections official in the state. Every one of your county commissions, the county clerk is the secretary. She's the elections official for the county. This is the way that it works in America. And now you're running with no secretary here. Where's the Secretary of State? Why is she not here making these decisions and not doing her job as the secretary without a vote? I mean, just like you have an attorney without a vote, your attorney has the exact, under the bylaws, is my understanding, has the exact same authority and responsibility or, rights to participate as, debate and whatnot as the Secretary of State and Mr. Woods and your executive director. So I'm finding it hard to believe that the Secretary of State even knows, well, she's going to know soon that, this is a problem, or that she even knows that she was supposed to be here. Don't know. It's just hard to deal with people that just do not follow the rules. I mean, that's a big pet peeve of mine. at cheaters. They say cheaters never win, but by default, sometimes they do, and it moves on and moves on and moves on, just in another day in the life. But
Thank you,
you know,
Mr.
fundamentally,
Gallant. Your allotted
cheaters
2
do
minutes has
not-
ended.
and you're not winning. And Madam Chair, in my personal opinion, you are a cheater. Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to address the commission. At this time, there's no further public commentary for today's meeting. We're going to move on in our agenda to unfinished business. We have Kim Brace, who will chat with us from Election Data Services, and he is going to continue his discussion on the Data Cube, Part 1. So Kim Brace, there you are. Hi.
Hello there. How are you?
Good. I'll quiet down because we stole your time the last time. So
Okay, that's fine. Thank you all. It's good to be here again. I apologize. I haven't left the place, so I'm still kind of unshaven. I'm still rivaling for Santa Claus, I think, by the end of the year is what it looks like. And I'll probably surprise everybody when I do get a haircut and shave. People will talk about my younger brother or something along that line. I'm going to share my screen so that we can show you some of the things I have for you today. And let me go to full screen. Can everybody see that first opening slide? Great, thank you, Rebecca. Okay, as you recall, last week we talked about redistricting data elements and the data cube. We went through all the geography sides of things. We talked about 2020 geography. We should be cognizant that we are also looking at 2010 and even 2000 geography just to see where changes are as it relates. This can be apparent in some of the pictures that we have created and some of the differences that we're seeing in terms of geography, certainly between what the state has and what the Census Bureau has. On the left-hand side, as I noted last week, the township boundary discrepancy on that side, but also the congressional district discrepancy on the right side between what is been in the Tiger file from the Census Bureau and what the state says that congressional district boundary is in Oakland. We've taken a look at some of the geography that the Census Bureau is providing for the state and looking at the population. So we talked last week about census tracts. That's one of the kinds of geographies that we have from the Census Bureau. There's a wide variety of sizes of census tracts. Here's the two extremes. On the left-hand side, 13,000 people in that Macomb census tract on the left-hand side. But on the right-hand side, that census tract has one person in it. That is part of the auto plant there in Wayne County. I think that probably one person was the guard there that ends up living there or something along that line. At least they got counted by the census in 2010. But you see the kind of diabolically different kinds of populations that we deal with census geography. When we go down to a lower level, at the block group level, there is a wide variety of populations at the block group level. Block groups, if you remember from last week, are important because they try to depict neighborhoods. But here on the right-hand side, this is a block group that has been created and probably a remnants before the freeway came in, but it's showing on people on both sides of the block of the freeway. And that's part of the ACS data that comes into play. It's not a lot of people, obviously, 17 people in that block group. When we go down to the census block level, there's some important distinctions. You look on the left-hand side, that is the largest census block in the state by area up there in the UP. Not a lot of people, obviously, but that is a census block. It is something created by visible features from the Census Bureau. The more important one is on the right-hand side. And here are census blocks in Oakland County, more suburban areas. Why this is important is to understand some of the distinctions that are here. If we look at Census Block 204, that street does not come through. It stops right here at the southern part of it. So it does not form a physical feature. So the people on both sides of this street are all in Census Block 204. But when we look up here, Census Block 1003 is actually all of this area here, including the houses on the south side of that street, as well as the houses in here, because there's no crossing or there's no visible feature that was utilized to define a census block. Same thing over here between these two streets. And so as a result, from physical feature wise, this area and these people are all in Census Block 1003. That's one of the big problems that we have sometimes with census geography, and certainly looking at visible features to define census blocks. We in other states where we were involved with the updating of census blocks, we ended up using back property lines here, so that 103 was just the people that are on the outside of the street and not the people in this other neighborhood there. That also helps from the standpoint of drawing district boundaries. Right now, if we were to put Census Block 1003 into a district and not the other ones, you have the sawtooth effect of what's going on. It's something to keep in mind and be aware of in terms of geography and how that can ultimately impact maybe some of your lines if you're not careful. It would also create a larger compactness score so that it would be less compact in these instances if you use that census block as a boundary. That's some of the keys to understand as you look towards geography and helping you on the redistricting side. Certainly in terms of population wise, census blocks can be very large. Here's 4 instances that have the largest census block population in the state. They are, in fact, special circumstances, the universities, correction facilities, all of that kind of circumstance. So those are kind of understandable from the standpoint of census blocks, but that's what a census block is. And so when you're looking at drawing a district, it may be that these census blocks start looking at being a larger component of the district that you are creating. So look at those kind of circumstances that come into play. Geography is certainly something that will have an impact as we go forward in drawing. Now, I talked a lot about geography last week, and finishing up here, I wanted to let you all ask any questions that you might have in terms of the geography from the Census Bureau.
Commissioner Eve and then Commissioner Wagner are going to come to you with a question, Kim.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Bryce. That was very informative. My question is in regard to, I guess, the usefulness of these census blocks, because they're not really standardized in any way. I mean, to me, it doesn't seem like they're standardized in geography, because it's about, visible features. So they don't all have, as you just went over, they don't all have the same square footage, but then they're also wildly different in population. I think last week you said the average population in each block was around 48, yeah, you just showed us slides where there were thousands of people in census blocks because of that geography. So I guess my question is there any type of standardized method on the level of census blocks to look at?
That's a very good question. Unfortunately, from the Census Bureau's standpoint, census blocks are really being defined by geography, not by people. So it is the geography that is dictating a census block. The Bureau has gone to automated the process of creating those census blocks, but states do have an opportunity in the phase one operation that's basically running in the years ending in 5 and 6. The states have the opportunity to make recommendations in terms of the census blocks. As I mentioned in that 1003 block that we have there in Oakland, that could be changed by usually demographers or geographers. Your GIS department in the state could be a good one to go to kind of fix and correct some of these things. But it is a valid question in terms of using that level of geography to draw with. That is the lowest level that we have within the database. And so as you're looking at the potential of drawing districts that are very equal, for example, it may be that you need to go down to the census block level, certainly to swap between a 3 populated block and a 2 populated block or a 1 populated block to make things exactly even, for example. That is a technique in terms of redistricting. But it is something that is important to realize for another circumstance, which I'm going to talk about today too. It is the circumstance of this disclosure avoidance issue that I'm going to talk to you about today. The block level data is going to get much more messy because of this disclosure avoidance circumstance. And so even the population numbers that I had up there on the maps, they're not going to be as exact as they were before. They're going to be having a kind of a fudge factor. Certainly that will impact the kinds of things that you could draw this time, but it's something to be cognizant of in that regard. Blocks are just another level of geography to make use of. You could try to draw just on the basis of townships, for example, or census tracts or other kinds of geographies. That's why I wanted to let you see all of the different varieties of census geography. One option certainly would be to try to avoid using census blocks, but that's your choice.
Commissioner Wagner and then Commissioner Clark.
Oh, you're muted, Aaron.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Verizon commercial here. I was going to ask you on that first slide you showed us, what prompts the discrepancies between the census block data and the state?
That's a very good question. That's a very good question. And it is something that ultimately probably the state has to look at, certainly in terms of the 2020 geography that we have from the Census Bureau. As I mentioned last week, there have been changes. It's not the same census blocks from 2010 to 2020. They have made efforts to clean things up. Maybe the state cleaned things up because it had a better aerial photograph to work from. There's a variety of things, but it's something that we can look at geographically and with GIS systems to see the differences that might be there, whether or not they have an impact. It may be just that the map base has shifted between the decades. It's not something that if somebody annexed this little piece of geography, although that's possible too. But it's those kind of things that now with GIS, you can see these kind of things a little bit more frequently than you could when I started in this process back in 1980. And we were working from paper maps. Nobody had aerial photographs back then.
Commissioner
Doug, I
Clark?
think you got a question?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Clark. So my understanding is a census block is the lowest level now that we can move in. So we could move, let's say a census block represented an entire township, or there were 2 census blocks in that entire township. We could move one of those census blocks to another area if we wanted.
Yes,
another
that's
district
correct.
If we wanted, but with nothing lower than that. We don't have the ability to move anything smaller than a census block.
That's correct. Census blocks are the lowest pieces of geography. You know, if the state had been involved early on, like in 2005, with defining those census blocks, then we could have cleaned up something like the 103 example that I gave you. But basically, you're stuck with, because the population, as the Census Bureau is defining it, is based upon those census blocks that are now set in stone.
So an example of when we might want to move one would be if we had a district with a number of census blocks in it, and that district didn't meet the VRA requirements. So if we moved 1 or 2 of these census blocks, it may then become compliant. So that's kind of the approach we would take.
That is one possibility. There may be other possibilities, you know, staying at a higher geographic level, but certainly getting down to the census block is one option also, certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
And Commissioner Eid?
Hey, it's Commissioner Eid again. At the beginning of your presentation last week, you were speaking about the demographic mix of the electorate and how it pertains to our work. And you know, you had a few slides there of like stepping stones, where it goes from like citizen age population to registration to turnout and so on and so forth. And you mentioned that these stepping stones have to be reflected in the database. My question is, how do you account for, you know, different types of barriers between those stepping stones? You know, redistricting is certainly one type of barrier, but I can think of a plethora of other barriers, such as, you know, voting access and, you know, other voting barriers that could come into play as well. So how do we make sure that what's reflected in the database is actually due to redistricting?
Good question. What the database is showing is aggregate numbers on that side. It is the human factor that comes into play to add some dimensions to those numbers. If you know that there's a problem with registration efforts in one part of the state or one part of a county or something, it's not something that we would necessarily have in the data, but it's something that you could use the data to tease out. So if you look at the percent registered by precinct in a jurisdiction, you might see that sort of thing. And you know that in this part of the county, it's a bigger problem registration wise than in that part of the county. That's something that is there inherent in the data that will be able to be explored. The nice thing about GIS and that capability is you have a lot more capability of exploring those kind of things. So not necessarily that they're going to provide the total answer to you, but certainly they'll start giving you some clues of where things are. And I have the stepping stones in the second part too for you.
I think
Any
we're
other
ready for part
questions?
2. I don't think we
Okay.
have any other questions. So take it away with part 2.
All right, let me bounce back to my screen here and share that. And we'll go back to You can see the questions about geography, correct? On that side, so that's coming through. Good, okay. Part 2, we're going to talk about the other part of the data cube. That is the census tabular data. This is the second quadrant of the data cube for everybody. That will be looking at the redistricting data that we will be getting in the form of the PL 94-171 file. And it will also include tabular information from the Census Bureau in the form of the American Community Survey results. Both of those are data tabular information coming from the Census Bureau. Now, there may be other demographic files that are possible and usable. We are going to incorporate in another data source that we're procuring from the demographic company ESRI that will give us another dimension of the data. We're getting close to getting the PL file, but certainly the ESRI data can give us at least some look-see of where changes are occurring. I'm going to talk a lot about changes occurring in today's talk, so it'll start giving you some ideas in that regard. But this is where we're dealing with the second quadrant of the data cube today. And again, as Commissioner Eves pointed out, the stepping stones are important in terms of understanding on that front. Certainly, all of those stepping stones and the differences between those can help explain conceivably where you might want to go in terms of drawing districts, but certainly explaining some of the issues that might be there in terms of the redistricting process. So the stepping stones play an important part of redistricting and understanding those. And I'll probably be, you'll get sick of me saying that all the time, I think, on that side. Today's discussion, I've got major points of what we want to cover today. I don't know if we're going to get to the third point, but we're going to talk about total population and voting age population. And then we're going to get into some of the distribution of the Michigan populations. And if we have chance, we can go into a long discussion on racial compilation, but that may be something that we hold for next week also. So we'll have to see where we go. So from the standpoint of Michigan, the Census Bureau announced census numbers for 2020. You got 3 numbers. That's all. That's all we have from the Census Bureau at this point in time. What are those 3 numbers? Well, the 10,084,442 is the apportionment count. That is the number that is used for the allocation of congressional seats out to the states. Unfortunately, that number was low by about 200,000, a little bit more than 200,000 for Michigan, and you lost a congressional seat. That was unveiled on April 24th or April 26th, I think it was. So you have gone from 14 down to 13 congressional districts on the basis of the apportionment count. Important to keep that difference there, or that knowledge of that number, because it includes 7,111 overseas population. That comes to the Census Bureau, usually from like the Pentagon and all of those areas at State Department that deal with overseas population. But that data is only available to the Census Bureau at the highest geographic level of just the state. So as a result, when we start talking about redistricting, we need to look towards, we need to look towards the bottom number. That is the residence population within the state of Michigan. And that is the number that we will use for redistricting. So it's the 10,077,331. That is an important number. And that becomes the third number that was released from the Census Bureau on April 26th. But it does allow us to start playing with one big factor, and will let us generate, and I can tell you today, here are 3 numbers for all of you to memorize. By the time we get finished with this whole process, you will know these numbers like the back of your hand. Maybe you'll handwrite them on the back of your hand, I don't know. But these are the important numbers that come to us from that residency population. They are the ideal district size for the congressional districts. That's 775,000 people will be your responsibility to draw into the 13 congressional districts. That's the ideal district population that you'll be shooting for. And if you remember your legal backgrounds, that number is something that will be real critical for you to probably get as close as possible to. The courts have looked at almost having no deviation for congressional districts. The second number, 265,000, is the ideal population for the 38 state Senate districts that you will also be drawing. And as a result, you'll memorize that number. And then certainly for the 110 state House districts, that's the ideal population that you're going to be shooting for. Now, I say these are ideal populations, but there are some windows involved in this. And so we put together this table for you that looks at these windows. Generally for congressional districts, windows maybe at 1%, but probably less. But the factor that we look at is what is the overall deviation window. That is 3,876 above the ideal and 3,876 below the ideal. And will give you a high range. So for congressional districts, if you look at the 1% deviation, that runs from 771,000 on the low side to 779,000 on the high side. Now, when you're dealing with state House and state Senate, you have a larger deviation window. But because you have many more state Senate and state House districts, you have smaller numbers to have to deal with. So the overall deviation window that you're going to be shooting for state Senate is about 26,000. But for state House, when you're looking at a 10%, you're looking at a window of only 9,000 people, with 4,500 on either side of that ideal number. Here's the high range numbers and the low range numbers. This is an important chart for you to also memorize or at least see and be cognizant of. And the system will show you this constantly on that regard. But we've calculated those and will be part of the tables that we are also going to be providing to you. But I wanted you to see how those came together on that side. But unfortunately, for the population within the state, the PL files are not here yet. And so as a result, we have to rely upon population estimates to give us some preliminary idea of where things are within the state. So if you remember our first presentation to you, I showed you just the population change from 2010 to 2019 using the American Community Survey numbers that came out in 2019 from the Census Bureau. We see from the Census Bureau's data, the ACS data, we have that down to the county level in these 2019 numbers when we did these for you earlier this year. But we now know that we can look inside, and an important one thing that we always look at in looking at the numbers and changes is what does things look like on a regional basis? So we looked at what different people recognize as regions in the state of Michigan. The state divides, we've got different regions. These are made up of counties and townships, not always counties. Right now, we only have county data from the population estimates. So, but this is one idea for how to divide up the state. We also have from DOT their definitions of how the state is divided. It gives us another kind of a clue. And we also found up on the web somebody having some fun with some of the names, but giving you areas of the state. On this one instance, drawn on the basis of whole counties. So all of these are important ways of kind of looking at the data and giving you more global looks at the information. And so what we have done is we've taken these and kind of combined them together in creating what we're calling the EDS regions, or we call them JERGs. And this is the outline of what we've put together of a way of looking at the state. Certainly from the standpoint of starting to understand some data that goes with these. And that's what I'm going to show you today. So these are the JERGs, and we'll be using those and overlaying them in a lot of maps that I'm going to show you. So here's that raw population change from 2010, looking at the areas that we were concerned about and the JERGs that we have to see what is the population changes in that area. By doing that, we can look at the data both in terms of raw numbers and percent changes as it relates to these areas. So what we can do is we can start looking at things like the population shifts within the state. And we've set up tables that will be part of a Excel spreadsheet that we'll provide to you and for your website that can show some of this information and basic information so that everybody, public included, will be able to start understanding some of the demographics that are here. This is the population estimates coming from the Census Bureau of looking at county level estimates that they do every year. And so this is from 2000 and 2010, and then year by year from 2015 all the way up to 2020. Now, these are population estimates. These are not numbers from the official census counts, okay? But these are estimates from the Census Bureau. So it's good for us to start taking a look at and seeing where changes are happening. And if we look at these on the basis of these regions, we can start taking a look at majorly what is happening in the state. So for example, Wayne County, including Detroit and suburban Wayne County, had from 2010 to 2020, a 4% loss of population in just Wayne County. The metro suburban counties around Wayne County gained 3.96% on that side. So you almost see shifts of people from Wayne County into the metro suburban areas. And that's an important factor to keep in mind. Those central cities that we created, Lansing and up to Grand Rapids and Kalamazoo, ends up having a larger increase in population. So we can start taking a look at how that changes the dynamics of where things are. Certainly by the time you get to UP and up north, we're seeing losses, but not total losses in up north. It's only up above in the Upper Peninsula on that side. So we can start understanding some of the dynamics that you'll end up looking at and paying attention to as you start drawing districts. Indeed, when we start drawing districts, this is the impact that you're going to see, at least using these population estimates. And so we've created this set of tables, which will send you the full Excel spreadsheet, and I'll show you in a couple of minutes. But this will show you all of this data by these regions, as well as county by county for the entire state. But it's incorporated into it. It is that seat distribution that is important from a redistricting standpoint. And we look at this in terms of that ideal district size. In this is State House of 91,612. Well, how many districts can fall into this geographic area on the basis of the ideal district size? So in Wayne County, it's going to support 19.21 seats if you draw them exactly at 91,000. Now, remember I mentioned to you, you have a high window and a low window. So with the high window of 96,000 people, that high means that you're going to have less number of seats because you're at the high end. So you're down to 18 seats in Wayne County. If you draw at the low end, then Wayne County picks up 20 seats. This is the kind of dimensions that you're going to need to start understanding and be familiar with, because this is what's going to govern how we're going to end up drawing on this side and how many seats can go to this area or that area. You know, I've watched you guys for many months, and there's been the question of where do we start on that side. So I wanted to kind of give you some clues of where you might be able to start understanding the dimensions and the data to help you out on that question. Now, again, this is on the basis of the estimated populations from the Census Bureau. We're going to, whenever we get the data on August 16th, we will regenerate these tables so that probably within the next day, we'll replace these tables that I'm going to send to you today with new numbers coming from the Census Bureau. That will be ways that we can start analyzing how good is the census data. You know, we thought Wayne was going to have 19 seats. If they had an undercount in Wayne County, then is the ideal down to 18 seats with a window going different ways? All of those kind of questions we can start exploring when we get the data on August 16th. It's also important to look at where we've been in the state over the past 2 decades. So we put in the 2010 results of this allocation of state house seats, as well as the 2000 allocation of state house seats. And you can start seeing where differences have happened. Certainly from 2000 to 2010, Wayne County was losing 2.5 seats of state house members. That loss has only gone to 1.05 house seats for Wayne County this decade. Again, based on these estimates, and we'll have to see what it looks like from the final numbers, but we can start seeing where some of the impacts are as it relates to the change and where you might be starting to see we're not going to be able to support population-wise X number of seats here or there. So this is ways that you can start understanding that. Certainly in terms of geographically, we can see that. We now have, for these maps, we have the cities information in here too. And so when you look at these maps, and you can print them out because we'll give them to you, you can end up seeing it down at smaller levels. So we can see in Flint what it is in terms of overall Genesee County, or what's Detroit in terms of compared to Wayne County. All of those will be here in this data set. And we can map that kind of information to help out to understand that circumstance. We did the same thing with state Senate districts, certainly to understand that. You've got a larger base to deal with, ideal population of 265,000, and how many state Senate seats can go into different regions of the state. So this kind of information is there for your benefit to be able to study and understand. Now, you remember that what we've said is we only had a statewide number for the ideal population. So what we have done in these seat allocation ones right now is we have taken the estimates from 2020 from the Census Bureau, and we have made changes to them based upon the difference that is in the state number compared to the estimate number that the Bureau put out. So in this instance, the census estimates were increased 1.11% to match the statewide residence population. So that's important to be cognizant of as you study some of this data. You can see some of the changes there again at the state Senate level, and whether or not there are seats that look to be moving one way or the other in different parts of the state at state Senate, as well as looking at congressional districts. Certainly when we look at those, we got to be cognizant that we're down to 13 seats and not 14 or 15. So that will have an impact in terms of how many seats could conceivably be drawn. In Wayne County, it looks like a third of a congressional seat will end up needing to shift out of Wayne County in that regard, because the population is not supporting it. Depending upon what the final numbers are, of course, but at least we start getting some clues on this side. Now, one of the things that we have, as I mentioned to you, and I'm going to flip my image on my monitor. This is the spreadsheet that we're going to send to you so that you'll be able to study these and look at these in particular on that side. These ideal district sizes for all the years that we've got the data together for state Senate, state House, and congressional is there on the deviation summary tab down there at the bottom. But we also have information on the county summary. So I've shown you the data up on the top part of this table, which is all these JERG informations. But down at the bottom, we have all the county information. And because we have new data from the Census Bureau, we have within some of the counties. So we can see what is the population change in Flint City compared to Genesee County. And so we've looked at those and put those into these tables so that you'll have some of the major cities at least to understand what the differences are. And certainly in Wayne County with Detroit versus suburban, or Ann Arbor compared to Washtenaw County, and the city and the county. So all of this is there. So the county summary is there, as well as these tables are also generated for the legislative seat distribution. So again, we pulled out and showed you already the top part, but we can see in these county level tables, we can see how many state house seats might be coming out of Genesee County, and Flint in particular in that instance. So all of that information is here and will be there for all of you to study, both the state Senate, state House, and congressional, on that side. So this is part of this Excel spreadsheet that I will be shipping up to you guys so that Sue Ann can put it up on the web and send it to all the members and commissioners so that you'll have time to study this. But I wanted you to understand kind of what went into these, which is why I haven't sent them to you before here. So that's part of that scenario. If we go back to where we were in terms of the slideshow and go back to the current slide. So questions so far on population changes in the state?
Commissioner Clark has a question for you, Kim.
Sure.
This is Commissioner Clark. Can we go back to the JERG areas that I think I pronounced that right?
JERG areas, yep.
Yeah. Now, we as a commission haven't talked about that yet, but would we be able to adjust those, or are those cast in stone, or?
No, they're not cast in stone. I would certainly welcome any kind of modifications that you want to make and suggest. This was kind of our review of some of the data. It is your state. You know it better. I wanted to give you some ideas on that side, and certainly what people have shown elsewhere. But certainly these are open to any kind of changes you want to recommend.
Okay, I appreciate that. I didn't know because I hadn't had a chance to study the map yet. That's why I wanted to ask that.
Right. No, I wanted you to be able to take a look and understand what kinds of things made it up. But certainly you know the state better than I do. I got some good clues for you, but you know it better than I do. And so any kind of changes, certainly I'm open to that sort of thing.
Okay. Second question, when we go back to the spreadsheets, you have a ideal, a low, and a high number of seats.
Right.
Now, that's not cast in stone. That's a recommendation of what we should target for. The low and a high might be cast in stone based on the population.
Right. So this, because we're working with now confirmed residency population, this is what will be shown on the PL file when we get it. So as a result, these numbers, these ideals, district sizes, and the windows, those are kind of cast in stone. Now you may choose to say that you want to go lower than 10% and create new windows. That's possible. If you go above 10%, Julianne will probably give you a sneer on that side. You know, the state of Virginia back in the 1990s was allowed to go up to 16.4%, but that was under extraordinary circumstances. They were keeping counties whole. Now, you may want to use that as the excuse to expand the 10%, but you're first off going to have to get past Julianne, I think, as well as a couple of judges around the state, certainly. But that is, you know, kinds of things that you can be taking a look at.
Okay, let me ask a question relative to the high range and low range percentages. Why is, let's take the congressional as the example. We have a 1% deviation that's acceptable, but you only have it going up 0.5% and going down 0.5%. Why aren't they going up 1% each way?
The courts have said that the ideal window and the percent windows are based upon the overall range in the plan. And as a result, it's the 10% needs to be looked at as 5% above and 5% below. It's not 10% above and 10% below, because that would be an overall 20% range. So that's why it's important to understand you're talking about 5% above, 5% below. Now it's in theory possible to draw a whole bunch of seats within, 1% or 2%, and yet have 1 or 2 seats at overpopulated 6%. As long as you're keeping that deviation window of within 10%, that could shift within that. But that's the kinds of things that you could look at in terms of drawing.
So that type of methodology is court-driven.
I'm sorry, say again?
The methodology where it can only go up 0.5% or down 0.5%, that's driven by a court judgment.
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Commissioner Rothorn has a question for you, Kim.
Yes.
I'd love to know why it's called a jerg.
My former boss is probably turning over in his grave. It was Frank Jordan, and at NBC, where I used to work back in the 70s, actually in the 60s, he created JURGs, which is Jordan's Urban Rural Geography. That's what JURGs came from.
Thank you.
It's not Berg's like Brace's Urban Rural Geography. That's not what it stands for.
And these are primarily to help with estimations. Is that
Right? Well, it's also hopefully useful for understanding some of the dynamics that go on within the state. And as I mentioned to Bruce, they are open to change. However, you might want to change them, and I'd certainly be interested in hearing thoughts and sitting down with you and redrawing some of the areas if that's important. Certainly to give you better ideas on where shifts are happening within the state. This is just one example of what could be done, but with GIS technology, you can end up playing around with things.
I don't think any more commissioners have a question.
Okay, we are at 2:30 now. My calendar says that would be the end of my time. That would be fine. I do have 2 other parts that can get long, so this might be a good place to stop and pick up next week.
Okay, we trust your judgment because we don't know what's coming up the pipeline. So just to clarify, no more questions from any of my fellow commissioners. Okay, Kim, we are very grateful.
Erin has something.
Oh,
go ahead, Erin.
Erin, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand.
It's okay, Brittany, I popped it up at the last second. We heard when everybody went up north that the Upper Peninsula and up north population has changed and won't be reflected in the census. Is that something that is an unfortunate occurrence and we'll have to fix it with the next census? Or is that something that we can pull numbers from somewhere else?
Well, from the standpoint of drawing districts, the courts have said that you need to be using a common base. And so that's what the Census Bureau does provide. Now, when we get those census numbers, if indeed we see that there are big problems in how they count it, maybe they did miscounting up in UP or other parts of the state, that's something for you guys to be cognizant of, take into account. I don't know that we can necessarily generate a new set of data, but we are having multiple data sets within us to be able to see and be able to utilize that to maybe with different data sets being able to adjust those deviation windows in one area or another to reflect maybe what you've heard in one part of the state or another. That's why it's important to have that information coming from the public up and wherever, but also trying to get specifics from them too. I mean, I've listened to a lot of what you've been listening to also, but getting things tied to geography, that's what we use. That's what's important from a redistricting standpoint. So getting definitions from people, certainly in terms of their neighborhoods and all of communities of interest, we need to see those on a map. Where are their definitions? So certainly, as we continue on in your public hearings, that would be my words to you guys, to try to ask and get people to give you and give us that kind of intelligence. That will become real important as we start drawing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brace. That was a good tidbit for us to keep in mind. Are there any more questions from commissioners? Oh, well, no more questions from us. Thank you again, Kim. We really do appreciate you.
No problem. We'll keep the rest of it for next time.
All right, sounds good. Okay, commissioners, we're going to move along with our agenda. Kim actually gave us part 1 and part 2. So part 1 was an unfinished business, and then we moved to 7A, which he just finished. And so we're actually at item B, reflections on the listening tours, but Sue is not here. So I will actually entertain a motion to postpone item B so that we can move along with our business for today.
Second. So moved.
Motion made by Commissioner Widges, seconded by Commissioner Lett. Is there any discussion on the actual motion of postponement? No, hearing no discussion, let's take a vote. All those in favor of postponing item 7B on the agenda, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, raise your hand and say nay. The ayes have it, motion carries, and we'll be postponing item 7B for next time. Moving on to C, approving the updated meeting schedule, which is resolution 2021-62. And our general counsel, Julianne Pastula, will be coming to us to discuss that resolution. Julianne, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before the commission today is resolution number 2021.06.02 to approve the revised commission meeting schedule. The attached table that was prepared by the executive director and attached for your consideration, I'd like to highlight the changes on it. All three changes, or all of the changes, occur in the middle column. The Redistricting Process Committee would be scheduled to meet on July 8th between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. Just below that, the Benton Township meeting would occur on July 15th from 5 to 8 p.m. Moving to August, the Traverse City meeting would occur on August 26th from 5 to 8 p.m. And just below that, the September meetings on the college campuses, the dates are listed and the times 5 to 8 p.m. We have U of M Ann Arbor on September 2nd from 5 to 8 p.m. Ferris State in Big Rapids on September 9th, 5 to 8 p.m. Grand Valley State University on the 16th of September, again, 5 to 8 p.m. Central Michigan and Mount Pleasant on the 23rd of September, and Oakland University in Rochester Hills on the 30th, again, all times 5 to 8 p.m. I should note that the schedule that you would be adopting would be all the way through the end of December with those changes integrated. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I move the changes as set forth by council be adopted.
Motion made by Commissioner Lett. Is there a second?
Support.
Second made by Commissioner Rothorn. Is there any discussion on the motion? I see a hand from Commissioner Clark.
Yes, this is Commissioner Clark. I agree with the meetings that you just presented. However, I don't think there's enough meetings. So I would suggest one of two things. Either we add an additional meeting on Tuesdays for 3 hours, or we extend these out to be 6-hour meetings with a break in between. I'd like to get some comments from people on that.
Is there any discussion regarding what Commissioner Clark just mentioned? Commissioner Zatella and then Commissioner Wagner.
I think Aaron was before me. So Aaron, Commissioner Wagner, why don't you go first?
Thank you. And looking at the schedule, I thought it would be remiss of us to adopt it because we're getting closer to our census. We need to be ramping it up and not ditching meetings just because it's whatever it is at this point. I agree with Doug. I think we need more meetings or longer meetings because we will not accomplish what we need to accomplish.
Commissioner Zatella.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that we wait until next week when we have Sue come back about adding on potentially more meetings, and that we just focus on this issue of approving the time changes for the meetings that are in September that are going to be at the college campuses and the ones that's in Traverse and I think Benton Harbor was the other one, because that was really the change
correct.
in terms of adding more. I think we can kind of table that for a week until we have our executive director back. I think that would make sense.
I would agree with that suggestion. I'm not sure that we would have time to kind of fully sort out exactly the proposition that Commissioner Clark laid out. Not that it's a bad one. It's just, I think that's kind of a tall order to do right now, but that's just my opinion.
I would love to suggest that we look at I think we do need more meetings or longer meetings. We need to have more time. And I think what happens is that we keep pushing things back and not having time to actually decide when to do it. So I guess I'm just hoping that a future meeting that we get that on the agenda, like that we try to maybe ask that it be on Tuesday's meeting and when we're in Port Huron, or is it Warren? I can't remember which one, but just, maybe I guess that's what I'm thinking, because we do need to approve this, what we have in front of us, and we still need to have these discussions, like how do we actually make more time? Is it longer days, Tuesdays and Thursdays? Yeah, so I think what Doug's suggesting is we do need to discuss it somehow. We just have to get it on the agenda at the right time.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Commissioner Letton. I think General Counsel has something that she needs to bring to our attention.
I guess I need to understand what the primary purpose of these meetings at the colleges are. Is this another public hearing meeting that we're going to listen to the colleges, or is this a business meeting?
Pardon me for the interruption. Mr. Lett, would you please speak more directly into the microphone?
Will do. Anybody can answer that knows.
I respond to that,
No,
Madam
well,
Chair.
Can I just jump in really quick to give some general clarification? So the table that's before us is the meetings that were already adopted by the commission. So the reason that it was put in this form is for the convenience of not only the commission to look at, but also the public, rather than having to cross-reference between the old tables that are posted on the website. So all of these meetings, aside from the ones that I have highlighted that were put in the middle column and highlighted in the chart, all of those are already existing adopted meeting schedule. So what you're doing today is adopting the changes in the middle for the Redistricting Process Committee, the Benton Township and Traverse City meetings that I highlighted, and for the college campus meetings, and Director Woods, I know, is ready to give information on that. But just briefly, those will be commission working meetings. So that was the purpose of the full table going through December was again for the convenience of a reference point for to see your whole meeting schedule through the end of December. The commission has the ability to modify that schedule again at any time, and I've made a note that the commission wishes to see that on the agenda for the Tuesday meeting to discuss. The logistics that will have to go into that and working with MDOS would also need to be a consideration. Again, highlighting, like Madam Chair said, that I don't think we're prepared to address at this time staff. Thank you. And I apologize for jumping in front of Director Woods. I just wanted to make the general clarification first.
No, General Counsel, thank you. From my recollection, this table is going along with the adjustments that we approved that came to us via Edward was the third. That's what I remember. And so now it's being laid out that way. Edward, you can go ahead.
Have to hold it the whole time? Oh, thank you. Commissioner, the meetings on the college campus are just regular meetings. They're not public hearings.
In that event, then I think our process committee, which hasn't developed our process yet, would have a lot of input on how long we ought to be meeting for those meetings. That would be my thought on that.
Madam Chair, right, currently the motion that's pending on the table is a motion to adopt that was moved and seconded to adopt the schedule, again, outlining those changes. So that is what is on the table before the commission, if it would like to vote on that today. And again, the changes that are proposed are to add the meetings to the schedule, and nothing precludes the commission from further making amendments to their meeting schedule in the future.
Okay, commissioners, given the level of clarification and explanation that was provided to us from General Counsel and our community and outreach director, and thank you, Erin, that was a good addition. Commissioner Lett, that was a good question. Do we think that we're ready to vote? And then we can agree to extend this conversation in our next meeting, given the fact that there seems to be a consensus that we need more time. But again, we're just literally approving the table on the paper that has already kind of been set in stone. All those in favor of approving motion 2021-62, please raise your hand and signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, raise your hand and signify with a nay.
Nay.
By my account, the ayes have it, and we will be approving resolution 2021-62. Thank you, commissioners, for that healthy discussion. Okay, moving on in the agenda, we have future agenda items. General Counsel, did you have any discussion or thought about future agenda items? Without objection, we'll move to our future agenda items coming to us. Our General Counsel. Hearing no objection, General Counsel, you may proceed with future agenda items.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The future agenda items, I know that Executive Director Hammersmith will go into greater detail this coming Tuesday on this agenda item at the meeting. I did want to highlight for the benefit of the public that the future meetings will be occurring June 22nd in Port Huron at the Blue Water Convention Center, June 24th in Warren at the MRCC Banquet Center, June 29th in Muskegon, Michigan at the Van Dyke Mortgage Convention Center, and our final public hearing in our first round of public hearings will occur in Grand Rapids at the DeVos Place on July 1st. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, General Counsel. Moving on to announcements. If there are any announcements for the good of the order or any of the commission staff have any announcements that the commission or the general public needs to be aware of?
Hearing no objections, if there are no announcements. Hearing no objection, we can give announcements if there are any.
I move we adjourn.
Seeing that we have no announcements and there is a motion to adjourn, is there a second to adjourn?
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Lett, second made by Commissioner Witches. All those in favor of adjournment, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, raise your hand and say nay. The ayes have it. The motion carries. Meeting is adjourned at 2:45 p.m. Thank you.